Okay, we're gonna dip into the the history of my own personal knowledge of stories and what happened to me in regards to the idea of alcohol. Okay? Now for what I want to point out here is when you ask what is a person's expertise? Well, your expertise is going to be in what you've done with what you've been exposed to and known about in your own life. Okay? So, we have evidence that, and I'm going to say God can come through your mind, or we're calling it God. I'm not exactly certain, like, how to describe that, but God can come through you um, to point things out, to encourage you to do things when it is time to do that. That's your conscience speaking, your body speaking. It tells you what you need to do. Okay? So, I was thinking about the conversation that I had with my my biological father. That is not like the father within me. That is like the father that you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to get specific with that. Okay, so let me point this out about the name, strange name thing. Okay, so um, there's a lot of weird things that go on with a bunch of people having the same names, which is gets can get quite confusing. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. When I was a child, I don't know that if I knew about this or if I was told about this later. My brother tried to drown our first weenie dog, and that dog's name was Katie. Now, when I went back and examined all of my memories, now I didn't have it was so, like, I would say sort of chaotic at my parents' house where I didn't feel like I had the kind of quiet time to reflect and introspect when I lived there. And it, like, a whole new world opened up to me when I moved into my own house and was able to um have a new kind of experience. So that's in of itself odd to me, that it's like something really changed with the fact that I went through the sobriety experience and being given this insight that I didn't have before. But so I connected that drowning with a warning about alcohol. Okay? So it's not excusing anything. It's just taking into account what was happening that was trying to be stopped. Okay? And how was that happening? Was that from God? Was that from um, ancestors? What was it? And that I do not have the answer to. That also brings into the fact of like this puppet sort of relationship about how there are things within inner workings within yourself that are more than yourself. These questions are things that I would like more information about, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Okay, so when my dad, now this is the connection that I tried to make between the pool business and alcohol because of the chlorine being a chemical and alcohol being a chemical and my dad being in the pool business. That's why I was angry and turned my swimming pool into a pond after my dog was stolen on Halloween. Okay, so I can look back and then his business partner when he was at Caribbean Pools was named Jerry, which is also his sister's name. But Jerry and him, I guess, I'm not sure if they even got along or how that business was together. But Jerry ended up dying, I think, from alcoholism. And I do remember that his family was calling, um, wanting like financial assistance from my dad or something after the funeral. Some story like that, and my dad was saying that he didn't want to have to be put in that position or something like that. I don't really recall. I just remember feeling like that was a terrible situation. It's like morally and more to it. Now, he went, and I guess he ended up. Now, it's there's there was transitions between. Now, he went and worked with Bill Starks, I think, after that, maybe, and then he ended up with Dennis. I'm not exactly sure, but the thing about Dennis's name is that I researched that, and the name Dennis what do you call it? Um, is a form of the name Dionysus. Okay, so that's the god of wine. And there's a cartoon, a Disney cartoon, I think, of the god Dionysus being this chubby little drunken character who just sits in his throne eating grapes. And so there's another kind of connection there about what exactly the information I was trying to take in was. And then when my dad was a young man, in his 20s, I think maybe around the time when my parents dated or whatever it was, when they met, he worked with a man named Gary at this place called the Upstairs Club, which was a bar. Okay? So, there's another strange connection. And whenever I got sober, I tried to go back and look at that situation because it was called the Upstairs Club. And so when you make these sacrifices, like, so you decide to get sober, and then, like, you end up recognizing this Holy Spirit or whatever it is within you, and then so something better happens to you because of your sacrifice is what I was trying to come up with a way to say. But also, if you make poor decisions, some kind of form of something worse, I think, could happen to you. It depends on your choices. And I think this is how spiritual gifts manifest or given to you to help you transition through this sort of like confusion or spiritual blindness or whatever that you're born with, that you are trying so hard to get figured out, not understanding the whole element of the conscious or what the information is that you're trying to take in when you're born. Okay, because like I said before, when you see your parents doing something and then you're not recognizing that they are experiencing consequences for their behavior, and then you don't really understand why you experience consequences for the behavior, that is something confusing to see other people on the other side of you doing something, and then you do it too, but you're the only one that seems to be getting in trouble for it. That's how I used to feel. And that's why I felt like I was very confused. But then going back upon looking at it, now that I've noticed what kinds of consequences, or being told about what kind of consequences other people are having to experience, it's just that the consequences came in different forms for whatever it was. And so when so I said the thing about the rape happening at Sherry's with the 3 boys, and I didn't say all their names either: Matthew Nelson, Chance Lackey, and Davis Parker were their names. Now, I'm going ahead and going through with this name calling thing because I'm not going to be trying to be protective of anybody. It's like I'm just I am airing these things for the benefit of the world, to be like, look what can happen to you because of alcohol. Okay, so I had to go through these rape experiences, I believe, because of this alcohol thing. And the question I had was that because of what my parents did before me of having alcohol? Because there were warning signs of things when I went back and looked at it that were there before I ever touched a drop of alcohol. Okay? So that's where I'm like, your parents' sin, your sin, and getting separated from that in the process of how all that goes. Okay? And even with like childbirth at all, in this whole thing of like, you have an inner child, which is the part of yourself that needs to be nurtured. And then you have like there are people who have external children, and what exactly goes on with all of that, where a person is wanting to take care of somebody outside of their self more than their self, or they're wanting to take care of use the person outside of their self to help take care of their self. I don't understand any of those things because it's outside of my expertise. However, so anyway, Sherry's stepdad was named Ron Rogers, and he was an anesthesiologist. And I'm going to go ahead and put this in here. So during that time when those things happened to me, she told me that he was giving her anesthesia and trying to give her baths, like as a high schooler, naked in her bathroom. Now, and I do not know if these things are true. And then she also said that he tried to ejaculate over her and this other friend, Crystal. And so there were consequences going on. And I don't know if that happened because of what happened in the situations that she was involved with putting me into. Because this consequence thing is very something I don't quite understand how it goes on between people who get involved with each other. Okay? Especially with it being like, why does everybody have these similar names and things like that? Okay, so by the time I made it to Colorado, I talked about how I was strangled and sodomized. And the place that I went was the sister of Gary, who was the owner of the upstairs club where my dad worked as a bartender as a young man. Okay? I had gone out to a bar and met these Hispanic men who asked me if I wanted to go with them to ride a barrel bull, which I did not associate that with, like, bull as in being lies. Okay? Deception and lies or whatever. I didn't have that association. I have since changed the idea of the bull into something else, but I have to be careful with that because I don't know everything about the external world, because I can get to where I start flipping things around in my mind to change it for myself so that I can direct my focus. Okay, so I went with these Hispanic men to do that, and then they offered me some cocaine, and then they came over to my house where I was staying in the brother. Okay, it was Diana and Roger Hickert were their names, and it was in Akron, Colorado. And so I was staying at Roger's brother's house so I could do accounting, bookkeeping for them for their ranch. And I had gone out to a bar, and this is what happened when I went. And so these men came with me to my house, and then I told them, like, after that I made it to my house and they were with me for a little while, I was like, y'all need to leave. I need to get showered and get ready to go to work. And so they went outside and just sat out there for a little while, and then in a running vehicle, and then one of them came back and knocked at the door, and I opened it, and he said, "I'm gonna need some gas money for this." So I was like, "Well, I don't have any cash, but I can write you a check." And so he um when I was writing that check, he grabbed me by the throat and threw me down and started strangling me. And that, and then I started screaming. Like, you would not believe the kind of scream. That scream went on and on and on at the top of my lungs. And he shoved his fingers in my mouth. And then I bit through his fingers through the bones. And and as I was blacking out, I was praying to keep my life. Okay, and when I came to a little bit of consciousness, that I heard him say, "I'm sorry," and he was walking out. He was walking around behind the back of the house and then out to the door, and then he left, and then maybe he was searching for my car keys because his friends had left him there. And then the police were called after I got in contact with my grandmother to ask for help. And the police, my car was gone. The police found my car running in a ditch off some country road somewhere. And so that, I guess his friends, or he found his friends on that road somewhere. And then I had to go back to Colorado and go to trial and give my testimony and all of those things. But the connection that I just noticed was that the name Roger, Ron Rogers, and Roger Hicker, and that was another rape. And I also, another thing is I had my capillary in my eye, only one eye. It was completely bloodshot, like, because of the strangulation. And I had my eye like that for quite some time. But anyway, so I had to do these responsible things to go to trial, testify, all these things. And then there was this other man who was with me when the Hispanics asked me to go to ride the barrel bull. And he said before I went with them that he had a bad feeling and he was going home. And then he showed up at the police station, and then they drew the guy, like, completely like he looked like, I think. And I was like, that seems very peculiar that they were able to do that with a sketch artist. Like, it doesn't seem like, unless actually it was psychic ability, and he was able to see into that man's mind and draw that sketch like that. That was a very peculiar part of what happened. So after that, now the other part of that was about, like I said, my dad. I told my dad to go. My grandmother and my mother came up there to pick me up from the hospital. They took me to the hospital. I had to have a rape analysis done on me at the hospital. We stayed in a hotel room, and then I think at some point my brothers showed up. They left, I think, and then my brother showed up to help me get my things and get back home. And so, like, and there was this other boyfriend that I had tried to be with named Wes Vetter, who, when I called him asking for help and I was screaming, he was laughing, saying, like, making a joke about Ron Burgundy from Anchorman kicking his dog. And it was a horrible thing. And so I later I found out that the son of Diana, which was Rhonda is Gary's wife from the upstairs club where my dad worked when he was in high school. That Diana's son eventually went to college, got a girlfriend, and his girlfriend broke up with him, and then he committed suicide because he was, like, supposedly on drugs really bad. And so there's another, like, that's like a curse, like this curse following me. That's what it seems like, from these bad decisions. And so another thing that I have in my mind is, with all of this stuff going on that's clearly being talked about and very scary and all of that, I realized that I was not connecting the physical with the alcohol being something that was related. I was thinking that it was just that there were evil people in the world that I was getting mixed up with. But it definitely seems like it was the alcohol, the reason for the punishment, when I look back at all of these things. And so recently when I went so another thing was about the breast implants. I thought that I was, like, talked into getting breast implants as another spiritual message that alcohol was not something that you could nurse off of. Okay, that's like one element of it, and that's part of the reason why I wanted them out really bad. Plus I didn't want that foreign thing in my body after I realized the mistake that I had made. And I also thought that I could get a chance to be in a real relationship, maybe if I had a true chest, and there's so many factors about that. But and now they are AAs, like Alcoholics Anonymous, but except I'm not going to be anonymous. I'm not going to be anonymous about any of these things. I'm going to take the risk to talk about it because my soul is asking me to do that. My soul is asking me to stop being so protective of other people because of fear, because these things need to be brought to the surface, and it could possibly benefit the world to hear about these horrible consequences. So anyways, when my mom and dad took me to get the breast implants out in Dallas in February, when we were sitting at IHOP, he told me that Rhonda, which is Gary's wife from the upstairs club, had a brain tumor, and was asking him to be her driver because she no longer trusted Gary, her husband, to drive her anywhere to the doctor anymore. Okay, so you connect this thing about this poison, this toxic substance, with the doctor element and what kinds of things happen to people with having to go to the doctor. And then you start to see things a little bit clearly. And what I said, now this is not anything that I know is true, it's what I assume is true. What I said was, I think that's horrible because it's probably because they owned a bar and they were encouraging so many other people who were young people to drink, and there was consequences for that. And there's going to be consequences when you do self-destructive things to yourself, whether you're naive about it or not. And then you have the factor of, like, your naivety is partially because of your parents, and you have to get smartened up about that, which takes, developing your brain and your heart and your soul and all of these things and having the ability to understand. But there's so many factors involved of what it takes to get to the other side of this mess that it's just horrible. And so that was my assumption about why that happened to her, that it was another form of a consequence because they gave that out to people that damaged so many people, and even her own sister had to get involved in that because she lost her son. And I don't know exactly how all that has come together, but this is the thing that I'm trying to say about God, is that if you're numbing yourself in any kind of way, and God gets through you through the inside of your body, and then he can't get through you because you're trying to cut off what he's trying to alert you to, whether that be some sensation in your body or something coming through your consciousness or whatever. If you're numbing yourself off from those kinds of things, God cannot get through you to help you. And you have to be aware of that. And you have to be aware of that you do not want to cut anybody else off from being able to be connected with their soul and their God. I don't necessarily understand how this God thing is and how personal it is. But you do not want to be doing anything which cuts you off from that connection. Okay, and one of those things is learning that you can't keep, you have to get to a place where you're not asking other people about what you to do with your own conscience, because you don't know those people. And so you have to figure out in your life how you can get to the place of trusting yourself about what you should do every day, no matter what. And that will start speaking through you more and more and more, and it has the potential for things to improve for you. This is what I think. Okay? So that's another thing that was on my heart to talk about today. That is another reason why I do not want to work at a grocery store or Walmart or anything like that, is because it's beyond morality. I mean, it's okay, you do have some empathy for other people, but there's also the fact that you don't really have empathy for a lot of people because you don't know them. So how do you feel empathy about people you don't know? So it's you can't really depend on that too much for morality. But what you do know is that if you give somebody something harmful to their self, and you know it is harmful to them because you know that it was harmful for yourself, you don't want to experience the consequences of making things safe for yourself and giving the okay for somebody else. So that's a reason to be more self-protective. And the same is what I wanted to bring up about the healthcare insurance. When I went to the doctor to have my ear looked at, he just told me that I had earwax in there, and I was like, can I just get a camera and take care of it myself? And I think he said it's a free country, and he said, but if you want to pay me $100 and something, I can do it for you. And that was pretty much it. But I tried to talk to him about spirituality a little bit, and then after, and he was kind of making jokes about Spock from the what was it, Star Trek, which I didn't quite understand. But anyway, after I went to that appointment, there was a big billboard that went up that said that clinic was not for health care, it was for sick care. And so when you think about that, That's another reason why I do not want to get a job where it gives me health insurance, because I can, after like what I had to go through with the mental institution and losing my ovary and that medication, um, that I need to stay away from any place that provides that kind of insurance. And also, if you're trying to get like that kind of insurance, I think that's a form of betting against yourself. Okay, so like, trust in God is what I tell myself. And so, no matter what kind of guilt or feelings I have that I need to be more giving of myself, these are the things that I can do, is to explain my reasoning for it. And I can just take the risk of, like, it doesn't even matter about feeling scared of people anymore, because what I'm doing is good. It is good. It, like, wouldn't you rather have this information that there are consequences for these drugs and alcohol that are terrible consequences, and to have been able to prevent yourself or to prevent your family for these things happening to you? It is so much better. And so that's the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and I think that's good enough for now. And I'm going to get back to what I need to do around my house.